Hi friends, Eric again here with talking about the video game things that I'm making and also realizing that I didn't put the thing in the right frame. Gesturing at the monitor that no one can see but me. Yeah, so talking about the things. Again, nothing last week. Again, mostly because at some point I was just deeply stuck in I have to make things whole and didn't really felt there wasn't really much interesting stuff to talk about. Thinking back on it, I'm having a bit of a low energy time right now, so that's like maybe another reason why things might be a bit slow, but it's fine. Let's get the important stuff out of the way at first. Please buy Witcher's Heaven on Steam. It's still a good video game. It's still something you can buy and write positive reviews about. That would be cool. I'm still at 7. I need at least 10 before I'm kind of like slightly less desperate about things. I'm in such a weird place with this game. One reason I think why I don't really want to think too much about it or talk too much about it is because I just get frustrated about it being where it is in terms of the money that it's making or like the attention and like everything, and it's the usual stuff with my games, I feel. And it's a bit on one hand it's a bit unfortunate, on the other hand I understand why, because it's like for the same reasons as it is with my other titles. But anyway, it's something that exists and I think people can play and have a good time with, and it would be great if that happens. And again, if you have bought the game, haven't written a Steam review and had a good time with it, or thought you had a good time with it, please leave one. That would be cool. Again, only 3 more and I can shut up about this because wow, is this annoying. Like, I'm in a place in general because of with platforms and all of this, because of what happened over the last 2 weeks. With the whole clamped down on porn games on itch.io. Not that I'm making these games, my games are incredibly unhorny, as I am in the way I present myself in general. So that's a thing, but just seeing what happens and how realizing, I said it elsewhere, but realizing that this notion, and there's in general this notion in indie games or in video games as a whole, that we are all part of the games industry. Everyone is part of the games industry, even though it's not true, right? It's decidedly not true. But it's being in the way the larger games industry talks about itself and presents itself. It creates this notion that even smaller game creators are somehow part of it. And then you look at something that the stuff that happened over the last 10 days and realize, not really, because there's most of the anger and the actions that try to mitigate the damage that has been done, or because of a bunch of conservative assholes, is being it's being fought by, again, the smaller game creators, whereas larger industry representatives and interest groups and lobby groups and whatever don't give a shit, also knowing that even if their games were to kind of display the stuff that is supposedly not welcome on digital distribution platforms, they won't ever get banned for it. So it's you can see there's a big double standard going on. It's in general, why am I talking about that completely unprepared? It's awful. Because it's trying to figure out a way to phrase it, but for me it's a very nice just a very good demonstration how this idea of like, oh, we are all like even like smaller alternative and like queer game creators are like somehow part of the larger games industry is like bullshit. It's only true as long as it's basically presentable and marketable, and the moment it's not, nobody cares. And sure, my games aren't delisted or banned or whatever on itch and on Steam, but it just shows that like were there like a different campaign, for example, like I make deeply like political games in some way, or like I try to make them, and what's there to say that not in like a few months or years like someone's trying to like push for these types of games to be removed from store platforms, and I know, well, no one's gonna give a shit about those as well. So that's like seeing the process and seeing the developments that are going on, and like knowing, oh yeah, you're not like who might have like the resources and the power to fight it don't care about this because they're definitely not affected by it is frustrating. And also like just in general, again, like the notion that like, ooh, they could come for me should not be like the reason why you're upset about this stuff. You should be upset about this stuff is because people's lives and like ways to like express and like themselves and explore specific topics through games is being like heavily policed. And it's like disproportionately affecting a very specific group of people that are having in general a very hard time right now in a lot of places. And yeah, it really, like, I felt something broke in some way, like something that can't really be mended. It's hard for me to explain that part, but like maybe this is just like me being kind of in a like slightly downer mood in general as well. Might be as well as that, but yeah, that was like a big pile of things. Anyway, let's talk about JRPG game. Which interestingly enough, like because I'm talking about writing, and this is like something that's gonna be, I said to myself like a few weeks ago, what if I try and figure out how to make my games more horny? Which is weird to say because you won't see it. It's like, yeah, it's not like that. Okay, let's put the dicks out or whatever. That's not the thing about it. But like trying to like put sexuality and romantic relationships and like all of this stuff that I personally struggle with expressing for myself into a game, and like trying to like figure out a way for me to navigate this, and like trying to use a game and like character interacting within each other and having different ideas of what this means for them, was something that I thought, oh, maybe I can try and use this game as a way for me to explore this stuff. So I find this very interesting that like now this is happening again. It's for me, I approach this in a different way, but there's still like something I just find interesting, because I have been thinking about like this kind of stuff in general, like over the last few weeks, and it was like for me important to me to say, okay, if I want to have like a game where like a group of people are interacting with one another, and like a game that tells a story about these people, and like again like a larger group of people and like a larger world, you have to think about sexuality and sexual like expression and relationships, and like what that means for different people, and like how these are reflected in the world, and like it with the different cultures that might exist and whatever. So it's not something that you can't just like say, oh yeah, whatever, it's somewhere over there, I don't understand this. It is something that the moment you create a setting in some way or another, you kind of have to think about, or you don't think about it and may end up like being careless about it. At least I think you have to at least think about these things and like figure out a way of like how to address those, should they come up in some way or another, because otherwise you like might just accidentally replicate structures and replicate things that you don't want to replicate. So that was like something I was thinking about, and like and the way I framed it for myself, like try to be more horny in your games, which again is still like incredibly unhorny for like what probably like widely is considered that. But like, you know, like we're trying things, you know, we're like trying to explore things to like broaden the horizons of what you can do creatively. But yeah, that was like not really stuff that I did over the last few weeks. What I did, I think that what I said in the last video, aside from being just like fairly, I was already fairly down back then, I think, but complaining about like the prospects of having to make music, was like figuring out how to do music with this game, was like actually sitting down and writing, which is something that I did, and like was actually not that hard. I was a bit surprised how easy it was at the end, or like how quickly I got to like a point where I thought, okay, yeah, I can keep it like that. Other big parts, like just things that I did, was like creating a system for cutscenes and working on that part. And that's working, and like there's like also dialogue happening. I hope it's you can see. Let me make this a bit larger in OBS. So this is like part of a cutscene that's going on. There's still some placeholders in there, but you can see the whole deal here. One thing I have to say is like in like several things that I found interesting when I started writing these, or when I started thinking about characters, is like in sometimes how just having small descriptors, for example, like for each character, each party member that you're controlling, they have a name and then like sort of like a broader descriptor. For example, there's like one character is called Man, and his giggling at my own name, and his like descriptor is the disgraced intellectual. So there are like two things here, right? First of all, he's an intellectual. What does this mean? And the other part is that he's disgraced. Yeah, disgraced from what? Like in which context? So you have, or like another one is Vortex, who is a retired sword hurler. I think that's how it's described. What's a sword hurler? I think like my idea is like, what if like there's like some kind of like competitive sports that involves throwing around magical weapons, in that setting, and that's something that Vortex was doing, but she's retired now, which also implies certain things, right? When is an athlete retired? Either when they're like when they reach a certain age and they're not as competitive anymore, because like in general, at some point or another, the body starts breaking down, right? Or like the abilities go down, or the competition stops. But like, and just writing down retired then made me realize, wait a second, that means she's older, most likely older, which then made me think, okay, how old are the other characters in the party? Which, and from then on out, you then start to sort of stumble into questions and answers that you have to provide, and this is how this all then starts to follow from each other. Another thing I realized only later when I wrote that dialogue is, and that has and there are like other reasons for that, but like one thing that a lot of characters are doing. The boss that you're gonna fight will do that, and like a few of your party members will do that as well, is they are quoting lore, basically. Like, they say something that sounds like, oh, they've found it in a book, or this is like a story that they tell or something. And I noticed this later. This isn't one of those, but like these exist. realized this later that like partially there are like dialogues where like characters are just like quoting stuff at each other, which is a bit weird. And then I figured like, what if this is just something people do because they have no idea what's going on? All they have are like phrases that describe something they don't really understand because the knowledge is lost, and all that's left is just the phrase or like the quote that they can say that has some kind of meaning, but that like they themselves haven't come up with. And like using basically this fact that there's a lot of lore quoting to show how much people really don't really know what's going on. That's at least like a part of like how I was then thinking about that part. And again, like you see something that you maybe sometimes accidentally stumble upon and then realize, okay, maybe how can we use this, or like does this say something about the broader context or not? And that's something I found quite interesting, because again, this is like something I haven't really done this type of writing like a lot in the past. So it was an interesting thing to just explore and understand and discover and see. Just like from a big technical thing is the big technical problem, or like a general technical problem. I realize that right now it's a bit hard to understand who is talking. Like if there's like a scene where like your party members are standing around and like facing each other and like they're talking about something. Sure, they're like the dialogue boxes have like their names also displayed, but it is still, I personally found it a bit hard to follow. Okay, now they're talking, now they're talking, now they are talking. So I have to figure out a few more ways to distinguish like who is talking, or who's saying something, or who's reacting to something that has been said. There are like different ways to do that. One way to do that would be to give like each character a different like dialogue sound effect that appears. That's like something, for like biggest example would be Undertale, who did this, or like a lot of games did this in some way or another. Other ways would be to have the characters emote in some way. So like when they're talking, that like their sprites are moving. That would be another. Or a different one would be to like refine the dialogue in such a way that like each has a specific voice, that like the voice of the characters comes through like the writing, as well as like is transported through the writing as well. And that's something I think will take a while for me to get right, because right now a lot of the party members sound like me. Like if I would talk, with one exception, who like, and like that one is kind of like easy to do because like she's very different from the rest of the party, so it's like kind of like easy to like fall into that mode. But the others are like right now still a bit undefined, and therefore they're kind of like their roles in the conversations and the way they address certain things kind of like are very fluid. And I think that's just something I have to learn and figure out, and like that's something that only comes through like just doing it and repeating it and like refining it and thinking about this. So that's right now like something I've noticed I felt was like the biggest weakness. Aside from that, I like the general tone of it all. Maybe I need to like cut it down a little bit. Sometimes it's a bit, especially at the cutscene before the boss fight, or like at the end of the thing that I'm building, is a bit wordy, and I think I can cut like at least one back and forth part out of it, but we'll have to see. In general, I'm kind of like stumbling into a setting that I really like. I had a really cool like visual image for something that happened to the setting like in the past, like around like I don't know. Right now I think I said something around like 80 to 100 years in the past. It just had like a very nice image about like the moment where that happened, and then thought, oh, this sounds like something that you could like write a short story about or something. Which is, yeah, I could do that. I don't know when. I would like to get around to that, but I don't know when. Would be cool to have like just like in one part for myself, because it would be cool for me to have that, but also, yeah, also something to again to show to others in some way or another, probably. So yeah, that was like that part. I think that was mostly last week. One big problem really is that when I only do these every 2 weeks, I have completely forgotten. Like now I'm slowly understanding, oh, that was what I was doing and that was what I was thinking about, but I have to talk a lot to get there. I mean, I have to talk a lot in general, but that it's even more. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. And yeah, and aside from that, I was basically stuck in asset creation hell for the last week at least, or like I think maybe even parts of the week before. I'm not sure, but there was a lot of okay, let's do these things, and like basically repeat like the same type of work a few times over, and like just to create stuff. What did this entail? So one part was like creating like attack particle effects or particle effects in general. So when you attack, there's like a tiny animation that plays, or like when you use an item, there's a different animation that plays. There are also sound effects in there. One thing that sort of happened is something where like something right now in Game Maker is broken. I don't really understand what is broken, but it's a bit strange. So something you can do in Game Maker too is you can create local packages. So you go into, like, for example, I can go into Virtue 7, and this is what I did. Went in there and say, okay, create a package that like where all the particle effect sprites and like the particle effect objects and code that I've written for Virtue 7 is kind of like packaged together, and which makes it very easy to then like import this stuff into another project. I've done this a few times in the past, and I wanted to do that again for like the particle effects and the explosions. Went and did that, and then GameMaker confronted me with a pile of error messages, among others suddenly saying, yeah, so the project is like, it ended up with like me in a panic closing GameMaker, opening it up, and when I wanted to load Virtue 7 again, like the project of Virtue 7, the most recent project, it suddenly said, oh, this was made in a newer version of GameMaker than you actually have, which is impossible because I don't have it's the same version. There was no hidden update in between. So there's like something in that tool that is used to create these packages that fucks up the project files. I did a few tests after that, and each time the project file was just unusable. You can, like GameMaker then tells you, oh, this is like the versions don't match. Do you want to downgrade the project? And if you do that, it's fine again. At least it looks fine. I hope it's fine. I can open the project again at least, and like everything seems to be working. I can compile it and whatever. But I don't know where this happens because I can't recall having made an update to GameMaker in the time like at some point in the last since I've released Virtue 7, or like a month I think, or like a few weeks before I released it. No, wait, it was on the release day. That's when I updated GameMaker. I forgot. Anyway, so there's since then I haven't done an update, and I think I've created like a local package since then. I may have not, but it's also something where like there isn't really a lot of like stuff on the internet that I can find of like other people having run into that problem. Another thing that I've found in that like gigantic pile of error messages that happens, it also happens when you import the project, with the difference of it not also destroying the project file or like making it unusable for a moment, is that in that string of error messages that appear, it also says type GMAI chat is not supported or something. And obviously these days when you see the words AI chat or something similar to it, it rings a few alarm bells. I just hope that GameMaker doesn't introduce stuff like this. I was just like deeply concerned at that point. Deeply concerned, but like right now it's fine. It's just something I was like, it ruined the day for me, because I had to like, for a moment I thought, okay, do I have to redo the Steam Cloud support for Virtuous Heaven again? Because I haven't done like I think the last backup that I didn't have the Steam Cloud stuff in it. So I would have had to redo the Steam Cloud support, so that I then have again like basically the most recent version of the game. Not that it matters right now, because I haven't really heard anything about anything in the game being broken, so I don't have to like do an update. But like, who knows? Really, someone might stumble over a bug, and then having to say, well, I can't really fix it because, well, the project fell apart and my last backup version is like a bit out of date, and yeah, so that was fun. But yeah, after that, I added particle effects and stuff. Discovered the value of palette swapping. That's like something that's cool. And again, it's interesting. In part, I think older games have done this a lot because of like space constraints. But it is also nice because it saves you a ton of work. Like to do one particle animation and then basically create like 3 variations just with like different colors. And it's enough. And it really is enough. So that was kind of nice to do that. So like I have a good pile of stuff that I can use. But it was just very tedious, right? To like go like spend like a few days just like drawing like tiny things that like, and then make sure that they explode nice, and then think about ways of like how you want to do them. And like I do have like now have like an interesting like system also in place in the background. Like I'm not using GameMaker's built-in particle system because I never really spent time trying to understand it. But like when I tried to understand it, it was like looked 5 minutes and it's like I don't want to deal with it. So I feel like I'm building my own version of it that kind of like does the same thing as the built-in version, but like I understand it. But like right now, like the move spreadsheet it's extended again, and it now also has kind of like specifications about the type of like particle effect the attack is gonna create. And like and they have like differences and whatever else. I feel like it's gotten a bit dark. Again, the weather is not good, but I'm not complaining. It's not 40 degrees outside. So that's nice. Anyway, so if I turn a bit ghostly and awful, that's something that happens. Well, for some reason this like in general looks bad. I don't know really why it looks bad today, but it looks bad. No, that's bad. Why am I doing this live while recording? Who knows? Like, really, who knows? What is this? Oh god, this is bad? Oh well. Yeah, something has happened again in the video thing. That I think the webcam got fucked up. I don't know. Who knows? Really, technic stuff. The world is strange. Anyway, so I did that. Then I did sound effects, which was mostly, again, going into Virtual 7, exporting the sound effects, breaking the project file. I did a different, like, I spun off a save file where I said, okay, this can break. It's not relevant. I just need, like, if in case I need to create a local package from like stuff I made for that game. So I don't even know if I exported the sound. I exported something else from there, but anyway. Mostly use sound effects from there because I just did a lot of new sound effects and I didn't feel like making a whole bunch of even newer sound effects. So there's that, and there's also like this whole part of like, and this is something I have to tell myself, is this isn't a full commercial project. This is meant to be an idea that you want to explore for yourself, and like potentially at some point share with others. This doesn't have to be like perfectly polished and whatever. You can reuse things. You don't have to make new things all the time for everything. So, and there's like a different, like in a kind of like in a similar way, a similar problem I had for like the sprites for the enemies, which were like, it only took me 2 days. Like I was done this like a few hours ago. Like with the exception of the boss fight of the last at the end of the dungeon, because that still takes a bit to get right, and like that's something I'll do on Monday. But yeah, this is what God. Come on. Okay. OBS. It's cool. Live editing and stuff. So this is what exists. Don't worry about the unnamed enemies. It's fine. But again, like one big hurdle I had, especially yesterday, not as much today, but especially yesterday, was like to just get on with it. If you like the bad enemy here in the upper right corner is upper left corner. Sorry. I spent, I think, an hour just fiddling around with the color palette, or like the 4 colors I wanted to use. Like the sprite was done. It was just like, no, this, like maybe this one, maybe that one, like what's working and what isn't working. Like, at times it's just like, it doesn't matter. No one will care. Like this, it's like me just like wanting, like basically being unhappy for the sake of being unhappy and not really for any other reason. After that, it was fine. Today was really, I think I had like a really nice day today. And also like just to put things into perspective, I made like sprites for 12 enemies today. Oh, like in 2 days. Like it was mostly this quick because, well, I don't have to animate them, and all of them are being drawn like front facing, right? So it's not that complicated. And again, that makes it much quicker to draw things because, well, I don't have to draw them 4 times, or I don't have to worry about like, okay, how are they rotating in the when they punch or something. It's just like that's their face. This is how they stand. They don't have to move. Just make sure that they look okay. So that makes it much quicker. So I did like, but still in general, like I made sprites for 12 enemies in 2 days, which is fast, and like most of them look fine. Like I really like the discourse tree. Like the discourse tree and the holotype, I think are like, again, I like most of them, really. But again, if I look at, I just like the discourse tree because it's a tree with like talking fruits. Which I just find, where I'm just like proud of like the idea that I had, like on how to represent that name. Like I had the name first, like for a long time. It's like, okay, well, what does this look like? Same with holotype. Holotype was previously just like a floating pile of skulls, which was just a sprite I had for Witcher 7, where it was a projectile. But you cannot have a pile of floating skulls and name it a holotype, because holotype is only one thing and not a pile of several, especially not skulls, because that's just several individuals. Which this is like all like, look up what it means. I think I may have explained it in the previous video, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with that one, because I just noticed how good I am at drawing skulls, especially when they're broken. I think that's because, well, I spent almost 10 years of my life looking at them. So, like, the tiny moments where, like, having studied, like, physical anthropology is still sort of valuable sometimes, aside from being deeply embarrassing. But yeah, so that's something that was there. But also in general, like 12 enemies in 2 days, no way I would have been able to do that for an action game. Never, because I would have maybe gotten 2. Like yesterday, I managed 4 enemies. I was like, it's 2, no, it was 4 enemies. So I had a really good progress today, and it worked really well. At the same time, I think one big problem, like for the entire week, was kind of like I was really detached from the game itself, and that's something that happens every now and then when you're like working on a game on your own. Because you're like so focused on one specific thing, right? Give me a moment. It's so dark that I have to like turn on the lights. Wow. You're so focused on one specific thing that you're like, and it's sure it is for the game, but you don't have to really interact with the game itself to make these things. The only moments where I like touched the game really, like over the last 3 days, was like when I put the graphics in to see, okay, how does this look like? Okay, it looks fine. Okay, back to drawing again. So you start to get really detached from the thing that you're making these things for, and I feel like this is like one of the things where like, or one of the parts where like stuff start to become a struggle for me, because I start to lose perspective on the thing that I'm making, on like the overall thing that I'm excited about, and it's just like it turns into work, and like nothing but work. Sure, it's interesting, like sometimes, and sometimes it's fun when you like have a nice idea, and like mostly much later after the fact. By the way, I'm rarely happy with pixel art right after I said I'm done with it. Usually about an hour afterwards, when I look at it again, I start to feel happy, or like I'm okay with it. I'm rarely happy about that, but yeah. So if you make, and then if you like do this like a lot of stuff where like you're rarely happy about what you're doing, and you kind of like always kind of like doubting yourself and like questioning yourself and having to fight your own insecurities about something, and then not regularly also seeing how what you're doing is changing the thing you're making these things for, is hard. The other part is also that this is also then part of like this whole process of what I've been talking about, of like seeing this idea like become more specific that you have, right? Because, well, previously it was placeholder graphics, and there was like a lot of like me imagining how certain enemies would look like. Well, now I know what they look like. Now they exist. And in a lot of ways, and a lot of times it's different from what I imagined. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's very close, but sometimes there are like occasions where it's not really what I thought I would be going for. But then I have to be okay with that. And that's, again, this is like a whole thing where like you have to navigate your own emotions in a lot of ways, and your own expectations these things, and it's an interesting experience here. And yeah, but yeah, so it will continue because I still have to make the boss fight, which is another one of these, because I have vague ideas. I know that they're not really reasonable for me to try, so I'm pretty sure I will end up with something much simpler, but it'll be fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect. It's okay. It has to exist first, and then we'll deal with the rest later. Also, again, like the benefit of like having a game where you don't really have to like animate enemies attacking, or where you don't have to tie attacks to specific like animation timing, is it's so much easier to replace things because you do not have to worry about any of this. You can just like put a different thing in there. It still does the same stuff. It just looks different and maybe better. So that's kind of like something where I like feel it's much easier to exchange stuff later on, or like to tweak things than it were like with an action game. Like another sign for me where like just like in general I see like this decision of like, okay, stop making action games is I think a good one, because it makes these parts of the work, at least for me, feel much less tedious. And also like it's 12 enemies in this thing. I think Witcher 7 as a whole has maybe around 30 enemies. And like that took a long time to get to. But yeah, so but yeah, everything feels a bit like work right now. Still haven't really thought much about the music. I honestly don't want to think about it. But I have, at some point I have to. Who knows how and when and all of it, but it will happen. But yeah, like for me the next things are the sprite of the boss, and then the battle backgrounds, which right now are just like a placeholder thing. But that's gonna change soon. And yeah, I'll figure something out with music, and then maybe also get a haircut next week. Who knows? I think I'm a month now over what I felt is like the upper limit. But yeah, it's still there. Who knows? Anyway, yeah. Have a good week. It's August now. Wow, summer's almost over. Time to for everything to get dark and depressing again. Wouldn't cool, delicious. Yeah, see you around. This will continue. This will exist. At some point it will be called something else other than JRPG game. Which is another scary proposition. It has to have a name. It has to be something. Why do things always have to be things? Can't they just stay in this like vague state of like dreaming? But then you can't play them. You can't play your dreams. Anyway, see you around. Have a good one. And yeah, bye everyone. Now where do I